Welcome back. Things look a little bit different around here compared to where we left off, but other than the enchantment setup, not much has changed, so let's dive right in. I've been doing some thinking, and I am reasonably certain I see a clear path forward progression-wise. It just sucks, and involves quite a lot of grinding on my part that I was kind of hoping to avoid. Still, it is also the only clear path I see forward, so time to get to it. And the first action I will seek to embrace this brave new future is enchanting a fishing rod. Yeah, exciting. And then, fishing with it. A lot. I've dumped a fair few points into my fishing passives to increase my chances of getting loot, but without Luck of the Sea, Luck Enchanting Gear, and a maxed fishing stat, we will be here a hot moment. Or apparently not. I learned a new thing today, and that is that you don't have to get your Neptunium ingots from smelting items. Sometimes you can just fish them up directly. Cool. Now we just have to set it down somewhere safe before dealing with the mildly inconvenient hot air balloon of flesh that keeps dropping depth charges on me, and yep. When in doubt, just respawn. Works every time, 90% of the time. We will pay no attention to all the other fish that I've been throwing out. Those are, spares. So obviously, this is going to go towards creating a Stone of the Sea, which, thanks to the Battle Tower, I now have exactly enough blaze powder to craft. I have gone on at great length in my first series about how strong this item is when it comes to navigating aquatic environments, and now, more than ever, that is a critical asset. On its own, it isn't that strong, since all it grants is a movement speed buff in water, infinite water breathing, and immunity to some of the deleterious effects that come from drinking seawater. But when combined with other abilities and the natural difficulties parasites have with getting wet and wild, this is going to be a glorious upgrade. Predicated on me finding the sea with which to stone, which I have yet to do. I know it exists, at least in some form, but by accident or design, most of my random spawns haven't put me next to it, which tells me that it's probably pretty far away, and my only real hope right now is that rivers work the same way in this pack as they do in a normal 1.12 and end in an ocean at some point. Either way, more exploration is more gooder, so I kinda stand to benefit from doing this regardless of whether or not I find an ocean. Assuming that I don't get ganked by parasites, that is, which is a particularly excellent way of undergoing non-consensual species changes to everyone's favorite bread-packing equine, but sure. During all this world-hopping madness, I kinda gotta say I was actually having a decent time, which probably indicates something is wrong with me, but I digress, because sure, I am thereabouts 400 deaths into the run, but by now I can pretty much sight-read the aggro range on every parasite variant in the game, and that, combined with lots of water travel and a near-fanatical obsession with my keyboard's left-hand shift key, is enough to let me get some serious mileage on. During my road trip, I was also able to source quite a few of the ingredients I'll be needing here in a bit to fuel my master plan. And the first to be collected is a single baby cactus. Weird but true. Baby cacti, like their larger siblings, can be smelted into cactus green, which, combined with lapis, will produce cyan dye. Cyan dye can then be used to make cyan-dyed water in a cauldron, which I can then dip roses into to turn them cyan. Also weird, but true. I can then somehow take those roses and turn them into more cyan dye and repeat the process forever, producing a functionally infinite source of cyan dye so long as my bone meal reserves hold out, which allows me to craft a functionally arbitrary amount of greenhouse glass. Now, admittedly, I am not actually sure if mobs can naturally spawn on farmland tiles or greenhouse glass, but neither of them are solid, so I'm going to assume not. And if that is the case, this means that I can now do agriculture and stuff without being molested by the hordes of lone wolf anime protagonists that keep running around here kamehaing, hee-hawing my brains through my spleen every time I try and touch grass. That said, I'm not entirely certain just exactly how much farm fresh produce will help with that problem, so we'll see. The second resource, presented to me by an incredible stroke of luck, is a dead dragon. Just standing there, menacingly, casually laid out for my harvesting pleasure. I am not entirely sure what happened here, since usually these suckers are supposed to be flying most of the time, but I can only assume that the lag of rendering the world delayed its takeoff enough for parasites to spawn in next to it, and, well, a downed dragon is a dead dragon. Fearing a repeat of what happened the first time I saw this thing go down, I frantically ditched myself out of the boat before starting the world's slowest aquatic insurrection with the single sole express purpose of getting me those dragon giblets. It should go without saying, but Dragon Gear is going to be a major stepping stone in this run. My endgame builds tend to prefer Golem armor because of its high durability and decent passive effects, but on a per-piece basis, and if you ignore super specific edge cases, Dragon Scale is just better at pure damage mitigation, and it is far easier to get. Golem armor requires that you collect a bunch of super rare tablets to divine the custom recipe for each of the 4 pieces of armor, conduct world-spanning missions to collect all the random items you need to assemble the armor, and then somehow collect and apply the dozens of enchantments needed to justify such a stupidly expensive investment. With Dragon Scale? Who cares, really? Dragons aren't common, exactly, but they also aren't rare, and even the small ones will give you a good chunk of the stuff, so it's no big deal if you have to replace some kit now and again. The third is, of course, the ocean. I know, big target, right? But also, seriously, I'm sure it has something to do with Dregora world generation, but I have never struggled so much to find an ocean before in my life. Normally, my experience with them in RLCraft is that they're like the thing you end up tripping over and having to navigate around, because if you so much dare as to dip a single toe in the water, you will be suplexed into the Twilight Zone by a danger noodle with the girth and temperament of an average American school bus in time spans so small that they make the plank constant do a double take. And also, they're everywhere. All of this still applies now, sans the everywhere part. Of course, it's just that they are comparatively chill places to be now, since hangry sewer pipes are only number 27 on the list of things that I consider to be viable life insurance payout facilitators, and the first 26 will not surprise you. Alrighty, things are going pretty well now, so let's monopolize the heck out of it before the game catches on, shall we? Obvious, first steps are obvious, it's time to get some Dragon Scale armor going. 28 scales is barely enough to make a full set and reroll all of the skill issue quality items, but barely enough is still enough, so I do that. In an ideal world, I would be able to combine enchanted books to specifically tailor enchantment payloads for my armor, but that is not gonna happen here. Really, the best I can do is guarantee myself one decent enchantment by rolling the table until it gives me something useful, and then just accept whatever junk it wants to hack out onto my kit, which thankfully doesn't happen. On one hand, this is great, since it means none of my pieces are contaminated with, fire protection or something, but on the other, it means that I don't get bonus enchantments for free, so 6s and 7s. I can't really get anything better than Protection 4 defensive-wise without investing major time and resources that I don't have into searching for incredibly rare rolls, but the pool of low-level book enchantments is small enough that I can pretty easily fish for Protection 1 and then just combine it up to bolster anything I care about, so I do that, and am eventually rewarded with a lovely set of Protection 4 Dragon Scale. It's not great by my standards, but it is good enough to almost be worth wearing, which is a marked improvement over being buck naked in the middle of the ocean. That's not all I can do, though. Baubles and trinkets are also a substantial untapped source of effective HP that I've yet to do anything with, and it's time to fix that. I may not have particularly strong options available to me right now, but I do have some cheap ones, and Undying and Hardy upgrades work just as well on garbage as they do the pinnacle of in-game content. For rings, I opt for speed potion rings because that is basically the only thing I can make and benefit from, and also because they can be rerolled with gold, which is very, very cheap. Unfortunately, I ran out of gold while rolling for Undying perks, so we'll add that to the shopping list. The rest of the baubles are just a mix of random junk. I can make a tool belt and quiver dirt cheap, and they reroll with leather, so Undying is basically free. The only thing I can wear as a head and offhand bauble is the sunglasses and cobalt shield that I grabbed a while ago, and I straight up don't have anything for a body bauble, so it gets to be my beezer or some vitamins or something. I can't re-roll any of these due to their spectral silt requirements, which blows, but I can at least put Hardy on them, which is better than nothing. Of course, rolling for Hardy effects on all of them needs XP, which burns such a huge hole through my iron block supply that I gave up halfway through, but needs must when the parasites come a-calling. The end result of all this work? This. A sort of maybe decently enough equipped loadout with the ability to do such useful things as engage low-level mobs without instantly dying. Parasites are going to no-sell me without even noticing I was in their way, but I do at least stand a fair chance of surviving anything else long enough to run away. In the ocean, at least. Now we just have to get there. I am absolutely not going to be carrying all of my very expensive gear on me while I get into position, but there's a handy-dandy block designed exactly for this sort of situation called an ender chest that will let me get around that requirement, so all I really have to do is warp to the ocean waystone, sneak out past the breakers, drop my chest, gear up, and scram before I get spotted. So, welcome to the ocean. As a aquatic waterfowl, I can confirm that we like it here, a lot. visibility, mobility, mostly parasite-free. This place really has it all. So let me introduce you to how this is gonna work. With what little remained of my iron, I was able to cobble together what will be my preferred weapon for this next bit, a very well-stacked diamond javelin. This particular selection is a fairly effective compromise between all the various different issues I need to work around for this run. First, it's ranged, which is so obviously an advantage that it almost doesn't even bear mentioning. Second, it's cheap. Also, no further comment required. Third, it's enchantable without too much work. Javelins are part of a new ranged weapon class added by Spartan Weaponry that has an entirely unique enchantment pool, and without all the junk added by other mods cluttering up the rolls, you can max them out pretty easily. And finally, fourth, with the right enchantments, they can be used underwater, no strings attached. Bows can sort of do this, but you have to use custom arrows, and none of them work with infinity, so they aren't super sustainable. Ranged options in water are otherwise pretty uncommon, and most of them suck, so for that reason alone, I'm kind of shoehorned into using this. Javelins do, however, come with two drawbacks. The first is limited ammo. The javelin item can be used as a lousy melee weapon, but its intended use is throwing, and each item represents 4 charges of the ranged attack offered by the weapon. Once you exhaust those, you have to recharge them by picking up your projectiles, which can sometimes be tricky, and it makes it nearly useless for prolonged engagements. There is an enchantment called Return, which is a carbon copy of Vanilla Minecraft's Loyalty enchantment for Trident that helps mitigate this somewhat, but it's pretty buggy, and once you permanently lose a projectile, you can't get it back without repairing the weapon. The other drawback is that you can friendly fire yourself with them, which hurts a lot. We're on a bit of a time crunch here though, so let's get moving. It's summer, for now, which is the only reason I can spend large amounts of time in the ocean without special equipment. I don't have that equipment, so I might maybe have a week of uninterrupted aquatic aerobics before simple survival starts being annoying, and a couple more weeks after that, ocean travel will become functionally impossible. My first goal then is exploration and waystone collection, preferably of the ones on or near land features, but frankly I will take what I can get. It's pretty easy, especially with how speedy I am. The second, though, that one's a bit more dangerous. You see, the Stone of the Sea isn't the only passive water-based buff I can get, but in order to get the other one, I might need to take out more than a few sea serpents in industrial quantities, and they kind of fight back. My first target is a lovely blue creature whose dump stat was clearly intelligence because I barely even needed to do anything before it beached itself on a sandy little atoll and let me spear it into the floor. Go figure. My second is a bronze one, who was smart enough to realize that it should maybe, return fire, but as I'd hoped, my hypermobility in water means that I can strafe its fire outright while still javelining it down. Also, hello, hypothermia. Nice of you to stop by. My third heinously dangerous aquatic foe ends up not even being a sea serpent, but instead a sentient chest mob called a mimic that can rarely appear when you open underground loot chests. They drop unique baubles that can be very good, but in my case I'm straight up unable to hit the thing for reasons beyond my comprehension. I eventually figured out that you have to attack it while its mouth is open, dragged it to a nearby set piece, and shanked it there, netting myself a nearly useless trinket called a pocket piston that increases the knockback of your attacks before I split, seconds away from being attacked by the parasites. This trend continues for a while, and looking back on it, in hindsight I'm not even entirely certain why I bothered hunting sea serpents, because I never used them for anything. But regardless, I also did other things, like find interesting situations such as this one, where 2 Guardian Temples have spawned directly next to each other. As far as I'm aware, this is entirely impossible in the base game, so I'm thinking some mod weirdness is going on here, but the how is not terribly important. If you recall back to the first series I did on RLCraft, I utterly split the game open by building a mob farm out of one of these, and I was very tempted to do that again here, but I honestly don't think it would work. I do have a soft policy of not repeating tech if I can avoid it, since I think it would make watching repeat playthroughs of the same pack boring, but for this run we are suspending that rule because for once I don't need to handicap myself any further, and making a Guardian farm in the Land of Parasites is tricky enough as it is because all you need is 1 high-level parasite spawn before you have a disaster on your hands, and a disaster in a confined space with hundreds of constantly respawning Guardians is an excellent way to lose your forklift certification. That said, this particular set of structures was not terribly well suited for Guardian farming anyway, just because of the proximity to, bland, so we'll skip it. For now, I just grab the vitamins from the Elder Guardians and bail. Helping 2 temples wouldn't even help the spawn rate for reasons, and there's no need to make things more complicated than they have to be. In retrospect, I need not have been concerned about farming serpents. You might think that a big, dangerous mob like them would have an equally dangerous moveset that forces me to engage in carefully calculated combat, but no, actually not. Most of the time, I didn't even end up fighting them fairly. I just slammed spears into them without any opposition whatsoever because they spotted some poor helpless parasite on the shoreline, leapt out of the ocean thinking they were going to RK the thing into chitinous soup from low Earth orbit, and then got stuck in mud or a tree or something. I'm not going to turn down the free stuff, mind you, but dragons definitely have them beat when it comes to not being janky. During this adventure, I also got a first-hand confirmation of what happened to my dragon corpse from episode 1. Whilst motorboating up a river, I spotted a landed dragon, and as I am wont to do, decided to try taking it off. This failed, or rather, succeeded, but in the wrong way, and there was such a strong parasite presence that I was forced away. The dragon fried all the parasites that were attacking it and took off, and I wrote it off as impossible to take out without a bow. And then a couple of seconds later, I noticed that it had turned into a parasite version of a dragon. So yeah, dragons can absolutely be converted. Good to know. It's definitely not a 100% for sure thing, and there's probably a mechanic or something in play here that I'm missing, but it is possible and is almost certainly going to make getting more dragon scale more tricky than it needs to be moving forward. This little adventure also proves to be an excellent chance to stock up on heart containers. Purple fire mobs have been basically impossible to secure a kill on thus far, since they are either instantly obliterated by the parasites or are already parasites themselves, and I have largely written off any chance of getting crystals that way. Ocean mobs have no such concerns, however, and taking them out is comparatively easy. Or, you know, it would be, if the parasites would stop stealing my kills, the little buttheads. At least I still got the XP. And then there's the dungeons themselves. I don't know what it is about set-piece designers and boats in these mod packs, but it seems like everyone and their uncle is caught up in some sort of brutal knife fight to determine who can one-up each other by making the most loot-stacked, balance-breaking ocean set-piece in the game. Every ship, without question, has a buttload of wool in its sails, but that is only the beginning. There are ships with just straight-up multiple stacks of coal blocks used in their design indiscriminately. There are ships with dozens of gold and iron blocks piled in unguarded cargo bays, just in case you needed a quick pick-me-up. And then there are ships like this one, who have opted to make their cannons out of 40-something anvils and have decorated the place with wither skeleton skulls. At this point, you could tell me that there was a Titanic set piece made entirely out of iron blocks, crewed by unarmed skeletons wearing shulker boxes full of nether stars on their heads, and I might actually believe you. It's ridiculous. Now, the real fun was supposed to begin when I discovered this specific ocean village things, but as is typical, the parasites ruined it, I think. After multiple comments people made on my hardcore RLCraft series, I finally broke down and did some research, and it turns out that there is a guaranteed mending villager just around the corner from where the waystone is, kind of chilling out. Now, I looked, and believe you me, I spent way too long looking, and I did not find it. I also didn't find much of any villagers at all, however, which kind of implies that they all got snacked on in the few minutes that it took me to find the waystone, so I will just chalk this failure up to extreme parasite energy and move on with my life. But despite this setback, the world is still largely my oyster. A really, really spiky oyster with mouse traps, and also, since when did oysters have teeth? What is wrong with this place? But still, an oyster, at least as long as the summer heat lasts, so let's get cracking. Step 1, health upgrades. The easiest way to get heart crystals in bulk is by far the mass farming of purple fire mobs, and the best place to do that is a rather interesting bit of terrain where a nearby dungeon has overwritten most of an ocean temple, exposing the guardian spawning zone and flooding it with water. This does reduce their spawn rate by quite a bit since they can see the sunlight, but with a spawning area that large, it doesn't really matter, and I spent a good while dipping in and out of the despawn range to constantly fish for purple fire mobs to greet and stab with glorious effect. I'm not going to make a proper mob farm out of this temple for the same reasons that I won't do it for the other doubled up temples just because the location is terrible, but I am hard up enough for progression options that I will make some concessions and farm the map generation a bit here. Also, it took forever, so I still wasn't exactly getting off eat. My attention was also soon directed to a rather more unusual find of an aquatic nature when a nearby dragon, who apparently got so enamored with my fishing activities they wanted to try it themselves, hopped in for a quick dip. This is like the worst thing that it could possibly have done with me around. The most effective anti-player attack a tier 3 fire dragon has is its ranged breath and explosion attacks. Both of these attacks are incredibly ineffective against a well-armored, highly mobile player that can't be caught on fire due to the inconvenient presence of several trillion metric tons of water. To make matters worse for this poor fellow, swimming counts as landing for the purposes of attack selection, and when landed, a dragon will try to close distance to use melee attacks and will rarely, if ever, take off again. The end result is a sad, waterlogged dragon screaming, "I'm gonna bite ya! I'm gonna do it!" while very slowly swimming towards a hypersonic, slightly singed waterfowl with anger issues and a large amount of disposable ranged projectiles. Only one of us was going to walk away from that engagement, and it wasn't the dragon. It did give me 11 scales, though, so, yay, free scales, but also, wow, cheapskate. This particular situation happens not once, but twice, which is actually a tad confusing because I scouted the area and there was only one dragon. My working theory is that this one spawned in as a mount for a hostile mob or something, because that is a thing that can happen now, and when the mob despawned, or more likely drowned, the mount stuck around in its idle state because dragons can't despawn. All of a sudden, I feel very glad that I chose not to do Skyblock on a Dregora RLCraft build, because really any mob farm design plus dragons is kind of a non-starter. Those things are a bit rough on just about everything. Just for a lark, and to put in perspective how incredibly weak I am, I even took a stab at an assimilated ender dragon that decided to join in the pool party with functionally 0 success. The damage is not terrible when you consider that my entire build revolves around spamming flying ouchie sticks and being too fast to hit, but dragons are one of the many parasite mobs that can learn to resist attack types, and they regenerate health, so any sort of prolonged assault here is basically pointless. I do have an answer to them, of course, but that will come later. So for now, I will focus on what I actually wanted to do here, which was stabbing the purple things. My very productive mission of farming and unexpected dragon ranching is cut short before I can get my 10 heart containers by the greatest enemy of my run thus far. And isn't that saying something? Armor durability. Usually wouldn't be a problem this soon, but events and also several different species of angry water noodle have conspired against me, and I have a couple pieces in critically poor condition. Now, a logical entity would simply say dragon scales are dragon scales and repair their armor with a different color. Yes, you may look like a clown in a jewelry store, but at least you are alive to rock the look. Well, not an option here. It's emerald green or nothing, and you can't repair armor with a different color of scales, and I don't really want to try and shoot down a dragon while parasites are doing their thing just yet. So, new plan. Let's crash the game. Yes, that's what I meant to do. Good job, Dregora. No, new plan. Let's go to hell. While naked, because why would I risk perfectly good armor and gear when I could instead crib off the Discovery Channel and then escalate by like an order of 100? Up next, Naked and Afraid Theological Edition. See, there's Satan now. He said put on some pants. Nobody wants to see that. All funnies aside, screw the Nether. We are here for precisely, exactly, and only one single thing, and that single thing is a spore of bone mushrooms that I can use to grow more literally anywhere else, so that I may never return to this cursed place until the very end of the game for the required boss fight and Cenazite mining. I have largely figured out how to work around the parasite problem, but to date, despite several thousand hours in this mod pack and its variants, I have never figured out how to make existence in the Nether more enjoyable than mildly suck. So let that one stew in your brain meat for a bit. To get around this minor case of crippling netherphobia, I employ a strategy that, for the sake of having a catchy name, we will call pogo portaling. Hell, much like Twitter, Wagner operas, and Dungeness crab-flavored potato chips, is a thing best experienced in very small doses, and life has taught me that exposure to minute amounts of any of these, except for Twitter, is not likely to cause any profound psychological trauma. Since I only care about one bone mushroom spore, I can exploit my extensive network of random waystones to slam down throwaway portals, spread out and search for clues, and then bail or get bailed by the friendly local combine harvesters without losing anything of value. Bone spores aren't terribly rare, so this doesn't take too long, and after a bit of luck whilst wandering out in the middle of a briar patch, as you do, I found some. Getting them back was a bit of an adventure, mind you, but whatever those shiny fire lizard things are, they certainly aren't accurate, so stealth plus more than a fair bit of luck sees that mission through. Bone spores unlock a few more exotic potion types for me, one of which being, in theory, the potion of flight that I used to great effect in previous playthroughs. While flight is wonderfully useful and all, I of course lack the right kind of pixie dust and can't make it, so instead we will have to content ourselves with the boring but still useful potion of mending. When consumed, this potion will slowly repair any equipped item or armor piece in your inventory at a rate of around 1 point every 3 seconds. Unless it's a javelin, for some reason, in which case it does nothing. With the extended variant, this equates to around 480 points if you drink all 3 potions one after another, which is almost enough to fully repair a set of dragon scale armor at the cost of 24 minutes of my life that I will never get back and one of my very few dragon hearts. So yeah, it kind of blows chunks. Would sure be nice if we could do something about that. And conveniently, we can with the power of off-brand medication mixing, brought to you by Rustic. Are your tonics and tinctures not doing it for you? Well, no worries. Look no further than the power of booze to wash your problems away via the synergistic effects of our good friend the edible ethanol, and apparently also foot fungus, but death is the ultimate disinfectant, so we don't have to worry about that. Anyone who has gotten seriously into the RLCraft experience will know what this is for, but I will make it brief. RLCraft, and by extension RLCraft Dregora, has a mod in it called Rustic, which adds a bunch of things that are, rustic.
Wow.
As typical for most mods in RLCraft, 95% of it is either aesthetic stuff used in set pieces or utterly useless, and the other 5% of it is pretty much essential. The 5% of it, in this case, is wild berry wine. When you consume a bottle of it, provided that it is of a certain quality, it will raise the level of any potion effects you have by 1 level up to a maximum of level 3. There's also a great variant that can extend potion effects by 30-ish seconds, which I normally don't bother with. The effect of these 2 drinks is so powerful that late-game builds often rely on them to provide supporting buffs, hence the name wine builds, which carries with it the interesting implication that the only effective way to take on the Lost Cities is while being somewhere between mildly and extremely inebriated. Speaking as an individual who has been recording footage in the Lost Cities light for roughly 84 hours, now I can confirm that this is indeed accurate and warrant that my abstinence whilst recording has resulted in me developing a non-zero number of psychological issues. That is to say, all I have to do to patch up my gear is drink a repair potion, slam a couple dozen really low-quality brewskis with myself, I guess, single-player mains represent, and go sit on my thumb for 8 minutes because the nausea effect makes it basically impossible to walk straight or look at my computer monitor, and just like that, my armor is as good as new, which is not very, but it's something. The real trick here is to make sure that you plant your berry farm on tilled farmland and not bare dirt, because bushes don't prevent mobs from spawning. You need the non-solid block property that farmland has to do that. Interesting corollary of this tech is that this run has, for the first time ever, made keeping my farmland hydrated a major home security issue, as if I didn't have enough of those already. But with that inconvenient little chore out of the way, I can get back to power leveling myself via a protracted campaign of very boring spearfishing, content in the knowledge that my equipment is being held together solely via the miraculous properties of dragon heart juice, mushrooms, and poorly fermented berry mash. And that, I think, is where we will leave it for today. Thank you all for your time, and I hope you enjoyed.